We're going to begin with Dori Hillestad Butler, author of the brand new Dear Beast series that I mentioned earlier, and whose first book in the series received a star in its very first review. Over to you, Dori.
Thank you, Terry. Well, hello from Seattle, Washington. I am the author of Dear Beast, which is an epistolary series about a dog and cat who have to learn to share a boy who goes back and forth between them and his recently divorced parents. I've always wanted to write a story in letters, mainly because I am a letter writer. I got my first pen pal when I was 6 years old, and I've had more than 100 different pen pals from 80 different countries throughout my life. But I've never had a story to tell in letters until Dear Beast. So it's about 3 years ago when Andy, my then 23-year-old, adopted a cat named Simon. The first time Andy came over, our dog Mouse went nuts. Oh, and by the way, Mouse is a 103-pound golden retriever mix. He couldn't stop sniffing, and he looked up at Andy like, "What did you do? Did you get a cat? Why would you get a cat?" And I started to imagine what Mouse might say to Simon if he could talk, or write him a letter. And that's where Dear Beast began. I should also mention, Andy got Simon from my friend Kevin Atterbury. Oh, and hey, look who illustrated this book. Coincidence? No. So Kevin and I are in a critique group together, but we didn't work on this book together. I wrote the text, submitted it to Holiday House, and Sally Morgridge bought it. And soon after that, she told me who she might ask to illustrate it. And under other circumstances, I would have been thrilled to have that person illustrate one of my books. But then I told her the backstory, where the idea came from, where the cat came from. And I was more excited when she asked Kevin to illustrate it. So I guess I'm supposed to show you my office now too. I'm a writer, so I say office rather than studio, but maybe I should say studio. It sounds more creative. Maybe better work would go on in here if I called it a studio. So there's not a whole lot to see here, but this is my computer desk. It's a sit to stand desk, so I can push a button and it just goes up and down. I do that about every 30 minutes because it's better on my back. Got my office mate's pillow behind me. He's not actually there right now. That looks like a closet behind me, but I actually think of that as a practice room. I play classical mandolin, so that's where I practice. I keep copies of all of my books on the bottom 2 shelves behind me, which works really great when I Skype with schools, because they usually come expecting to talk about one book, but then other books or maybe a foreign edition comes up. And so I can easily pull something else out. The shelf above that has my 2 most recently published books, and also M is for Minnesota, which was my second published book. It was published back in the late 1990s. And I am originally from Minnesota, so I keep that there to remind me of my roots. I also keep my fancy awards on that shelf. So I've got a shelf devoted to Edgar, a shelf for Mr. Geisel. I like to keep those behind me instead of in front of me because then I can turn around and look at them whenever I want. But if they were in front of me, they would trigger my imposter syndrome and make it difficult to write. So I'd rather have other people's books to look at when I'm writing. So that is a 15-foot wall of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Over there is my thinking chair. That's what I tell the kids. I'm a plotter rather than a pantser. So that's where I plot all of my stories. For some reason, I need to sit away from my computer when I'm plotting. It helps to rock back and forth when I'm thinking. Oh, that you could kind of see the kind of a weird diagonal thing. That is an antenna, kind of a makeshift antenna. I am a ham radio operator. My call sign is WB0LBB if you're interested. I'm on my city's emergency communications team. So if our area loses communication, I am licensed to communicate on the radio. So you might say I am all old school when it comes to communication. I like radio, I like letter writing. There's my other desk, which is where I do most of my letter writing. or where I go if I need to spread out. And then we are back. Oh, did I ever show you my dog? He is in here. So there's Mouse. He is very old, so he's having a nap. And that's my office/studio. I want to thank Terry and everyone else at Holiday House for inviting me to participate today. I love ALA, especially when it's in Chicago. I lived in Iowa for 19 years before moving here, and anytime ALA was in Chicago, my writer friends and I would make a girls' weekend of it. And when I moved to Seattle, I said I would always go back when ALA was in Chicago so we can still have those girls' weekends, but not this year. But hey, at least we get to still have ALA. So thank you for bringing ALA to me.